What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the latest episode of The.Layup.Line. If you're new to this channel, I post NBA content at least twice a week, and I put out these semi-monthly power rankings. If you missed my last upload, that was actually my update to March, so I'll put a card on the screen to link you to that when you're done. You can also check me out on most social media platforms, where I provide inside looks at upcoming videos and react to live games that I'm watching. Short, sweet, and simple on the intro. Now it's time to talk about the beard James Harden.
You know what time it is? It's about to be that time.
AP, they said I gotta come off the bench.
Thinking they know the game of basketball, they would then have to admit that they don't know basketball.
James Harden is more fun to watch this year. At least that's what I've been told when I tune into almost any Brooklyn Nets game. He's playing without the ball, he's getting his teammates involved, and there's less foul baiting and flopping. James Harden is truly an enigma because he happens to be one of the most popular and well-liked superstars in the NBA, yet when he was playing in Houston, there were constant critiques of how aesthetically boring his game is, and that there was no way that playing like this would ever lead to a title. Even Kobe Bryant chimed in on the Harden debate, stating that he also didn't believe in Harden's playstyle. Well, all of that debate inspired this video, because I wanted to see just how different James is playing. Fun is a subjective term, so only you can really get to decide what you think is fun, but I went looking for stats that would show if James Harden has had any major or even minor tweaks to his game. In order to do this deep dive, let's rewind to James's time in Houston to analyze the stats and see what they say about his playstyle. And to be more accurate, we're going to be starting with the 2016 season when head coach Mike D'Antoni joined the franchise. I'd say this is around the time where people started taking issue with James Harden's offensive game. The Houston Rockets have always been a team that heavily factors analytics into how they want to play. And over the next 4 years, James Harden, Mike D'Antoni, and GM Daryl Morey would go on to experiment and push the limits of analytic basketball. Coach D'Antoni has had a reputation as an offensive-first coach who has the ability to supercharge the production of his lead ball handler. Steve Nash won 2 MVP awards with D'Antoni, and Jeremy Lin's Linsanity stretch happened with Mike in the head coach role there as well. So when he came to Houston claiming that James Harden would be transitioning from an off-ball role to the team's primary playmaker, it left us all wondering what specifically that would look like. Well, year 1 of D'Antoni ball was as impressive as expected. Harden became more efficient on fewer shots, and he still averaged 29 points that year, but his assists jumped from 7.5 to 11.2, which led the league. Harden didn't have much top-level help that year. Eric Gordon was probably his second best player on that team, and it led to one of the most ball-dominant years of Harden's career. For the year, he averaged 96.1 touches and slightly over 9 seconds for his time of possession. James was more of a pick-and-roll ball handler this year rather than the isolation savant that we know him as, and on drives he averaged 34.4 pass percentage and 14 assist percentage. James was also only at 23.7 isolation frequency, which put him in the 76th percentile for the year. Harden would be the MVP runner-up and finished 3rd in the conference, leading a 55-win team that ended up flaming out in the second round. The second year under a new coach and a new system is better because if you can keep a fair amount of continuity in your roster, everyone is more familiar with the system. Also important to note that the 2018 season featured Chris Paul as a Rocket because the team acquired him in the offseason. This season is James Harden's MVP year, so I think it's a pretty significant sample that I'd like to compare to his Brooklyn numbers when we get to that point. James Harden jumped to 35% isolation frequency, and this is also the year that led to the most complaints about the foul baiting. He averaged nearly 20% free throw frequency on his isolations and averaged 4 free throw attempts on his drives. The foul baiting and flopping is a bit more subjective because on some of these plays there is enough contact to call a foul, but Harden will often exaggerate to make sure that the refs see it and call it. Regardless of how you feel about this part of his game, it's a pretty big factor in the narrative that Harden isn't fun to watch. Looking back at his stats, his touches and time of possession dropped playing next to Chris Paul that year, but because of the 12% jump in his isolation frequency, Harden definitely got the ball hog label despite still putting up 9 assists a game that year. Fast forward again to the 2019 season, and because of injuries to Chris Paul during the year, Harden's touches and time of possession creep up again here. His 6.4 seconds per touch and 6 dribbles per touch are the highest in the 5-year sample. His isolation frequency got even more absurd, going from 35 to now nearly 49%. And while the free throw frequency on isolations is down to 15 from his 18 last year, he's still getting his 4 free throw attempts on the drives. James definitely earned the ball hog label this year. He was a scoring machine and he had ramped up every aspect of his game that people disliked. He was ISOing more often, getting to the free throw line a bunch, and 13 of his 24 shot attempts were coming from 3. For everyone opposed to an analytics heavy 3-point dominant basketball, James Harden really became the poster boy for everything wrong with the NBA, and his 2019 season is a big factor in that. This is kind of tough for me to really knock James on because they sort of needed him to carry more. The team had lost depth in the offseason. Chris Paul was dealing with nagging injuries in his less impressive second season in Houston, which also resulted in a historically disappointing loss to Golden State, who were without Kevin Durant in the closeout Game 6. Moving on to the 2020 season, and the team swaps Chris Paul and some draft picks for Russell Westbrook as the Beard's new duo partner. This was meant to be insurance against CP's injury issues, but the on-the-court fit issues became very apparent real soon. The team also had to trade starting center and Clint Capella just to alleviate some of the spacing issues caused by trading for the Brody. And this year is a bit of a mixed bag. The season was obviously shut down early, and James and Westbrook were never really able to get going at the same time. Harden still had a tremendous 45% isolation frequency. He still got to the line a lot, but his time of possession stats were back down and his pass percentage even jumped up to 37% on drives. Harder to get away with calling him a ball hog this year, but 12 3-point attempts and 12 free throw attempts per game will still get you hate from the anti-analytics crowd. After an unceremonious playoff exit due to a gentleman's sweep by the eventual champion Lakers, this led to the Rockets organization falling apart. Head coach D'Antoni parted ways for an assistant coaching role in Brooklyn. GM Daryl Morey quit, citing that he needed a break before taking a GM job with the Sixers like a week later. James Harden eventually made his way to Brooklyn as well after forcing a trade during the season. Westbrook was swapped for John Wall to start the year. Just to touch on this part shortly, James Harden's forced trade request did get ugly. He missed most of the preseason training camp. He barely communicated with his new head coach and front office, all while being caught in public traveling and partying in the midst of a pandemic. On top of that, he reported to camp out of shape, and after 8 forgettable games in a Rockets jersey, his time there ended like this.
I mean, this situation is crazy. You know, it's something that I don't think can be fixed. So, yeah, thanks.
Finally, we have reached the Brooklyn chapter of this saga, so it's time to compare just how different James Harden has become. Well, for starters, his touches are up. In fact, they are higher than at any point in this 5-year sample. There are some differences here though, because there's a slightly higher time of possession for James, but his seconds per touch and dribbles per touch are the lowest in the sample. Looking at his drives and his pass percentage, those are also the highest in the sample. His isolation frequency is lower than any year other than 2017, because in that year he was more of a pick and roll operator. I also think that this is one of James's better isolation seasons in general. The field goal percentage and points per possession on ISOs are highest in the sample. As far as his flopping, I don't think James Harden will ever stop altogether. It's just too effective of a strategy to get his team points, but the free throw numbers are down this season as well. The lowest free throw frequency on isolations, and he's back down to 7 free throw attempts per game. Playing in Brooklyn in general has led to the most efficient James Harden that we have ever seen. He has a career high 64% true shooting. He's firmly shed the ball hog label, taking fewer field goals than all but one season in Houston. And as we've seen, James Harden is a fantastically gifted passer, but a league-leading 11 assists while taking less shots on career high efficiency is a bit of a different player than we've seen before. With Kevin Durant expected to continue missing time for the Nets, James is making a solid MVP case for himself. The Nets have looked unstoppable. But after all of this, I still can't really tell you if James is more fun. That's something that's subjective, like I said before. It's something you need to decide on your own based on your own taste. There's no denying that he's different though, and not just in a better teammates kind of way. He seems to be purposefully reworking certain aspects of his game, but I do get why Rockets fans are mad. There isn't anything he's doing now that he didn't display at all during his 8 seasons in Houston. He's a mix of the 2017 and 2019 seasons with a willingness to play off ball that he never brought to the Rockets. But that's just my opinion. Leave a like if you learned something new, if you like what I do. I post NBA videos at least twice a week, so help me hit my first 100 subscribers. I would really appreciate getting past that milestone. Follow me on social media to stay updated about this channel. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.